The deal was simple, the one non-negotiable pillar of our marriage. Stefan and I agreed on it before the first wedding deposit was even paid. No kids. It wasn't a sad decision or a compromise. It was a mutual, enthusiastic choice. We loved our life, the spontaneous weekend trips, the quiet Sunday mornings, the dual income freedom that let us build a life for us, and only us. After 12 years together, 10 of them married, that foundation felt like bedrock. My name is Reese. I'm 34, and until this morning, I thought I had a happy, predictable life with my 36-year-old husband. The day it all fell apart started like any other Sunday. Stefan was at the gym, and I was at the dining room table with a cup of coffee, sorting through the week's mail. Bills, junk, a postcard from a friend. Tucked behind our monthly bank statement was a folded piece of paper that didn't belong. It was an invoice from a place called Evergreen Fertility Solutions. My first thought was that it was a mistake, mail delivered to the wrong address, but our name, our address, was printed right at the top. The patient's name listed was Maeve Rice, Stefan's sister. The services rendered section was a list of clinical-sounding acronyms, ICSI, PGTA, and the total due was a staggering 5-figure number marked paid in full. My hands felt cold. Maeve, who is 38, and her husband Bowen had been struggling with infertility for years. It was a constant, tragic centerpiece of every family gathering. I'd always felt for her, truly, but this felt wrong. Why was her bill in our mail? I opened my laptop, my fingers moving automatically. A quick search of the clinic's name brought up their website, full of smiling babies and glowing testimonials. Another search, this time of our joint savings account, gave me the answer. A series of large withdrawals over the past 6 months. Transfers made on dates that lined up perfectly with the invoice. It wasn't just a bill sent to the wrong house. It was our money. When Stefan walked in an hour later, flushed from his workout and smelling like clean sweat, I was still sitting at the table. The invoice was laid out next to my coffee cup. He saw it, and his face went pale. He didn't even try to pretend. Reese? I was going to tell you. Tell me what? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. That you took thousands of dollars from our savings to pay for your sister's IVF? Or the part where you were apparently involved enough to have the bills sent here? He dropped his gym bag and ran a hand through his damp hair. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Stefan? Because it looks like you secretly funneled our money to your sister. Money we were saving for the down payment on the lake house. Maeve was falling apart, he said, his voice dropping into that placating tone he uses when he wants to manage me. Bowen's salary can't cover this stuff. They were going to give up. I couldn't let that happen. She's my sister. A new, colder dread was creeping up my spine. It wasn't just about the money. What did you do? He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor. They needed a donor. The first few rounds with an anonymous one didn't take. The doctor said a familial match might have a better chance. The air left my lungs. It was a physical blow, like I'd been punched in the stomach. You donated sperm to your sister? We were trying to keep the family together, he mumbled, as if that explained away the monumental betrayal. It was the only way. Without telling me? Without even a conversation? We built our entire marriage on the agreement that we would not have children, Stefan. Not yours, not mine, not anyone's. It's not my child, Reese. It's hers, he argued, the cowardice finally showing. I just helped. It's a biological donation. That's it. I felt dizzy, the room tilting slightly. He had taken our shared future, our money, and a fundamental promise we made to each other, and given it all away without a second thought. He had helped create a child, his biological child, with my money and behind my back. I need you to leave, I whispered. Come on, don't be like this. Let's just talk about it. There's nothing to talk about, Get out. He finally left, and I sat there in the silence, the invoice a white-hot brand on our dining room table. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law, Catherine. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone that always set my teeth on edge. "Reese, dear," she began. "Stefan just told me you're a little upset." I couldn't even form a response. "Listen," she continued, her voice hardening just enough to let the steel show through. "I know this is hard for you to understand, with your situation. But this is a blessing for our family. And to put this all to rest, I think it's time you did the right thing. Just go get a fertility test. We can all move on once we know for sure that you're the one who is the problem." I laughed when Catherine told me to prove I wasn't the problem. Then I realized she wasn't joking. I didn't hang up on Catherine. I just set the phone down on the table and stared at it until the call disconnected itself. The audacity was breathtaking. It wasn't a request, it was a command, a framing of the narrative where my body was the problem to be solved, my infertility the assumed cause of everyone's pain. My choice, the one Stefan and I had made together, had been erased. The next morning, after a sleepless night on the couch, I sent a single text to Catherine. "I will not be taking a fertility test. My reproductive choices are not up for family discussion." I blocked her number immediately after. It was a small, petty act of self-preservation. Stefan had been texting me since he left, long, rambling paragraphs about family duty and how I was overreacting. I ignored them all. He was staying at his mother's, of course. The family narrative, as Catherine was now calling it, began to take shape within hours. The first sign was the family group chat. A cousin posted a picture of her kid's soccer game. Normally, it would get a dozen heart emojis. This time, there was a comment from an aunt I barely knew. "So wonderful to see family members who value children. Some people are just so selfish." A few other relatives liked the comment. It was a targeted strike, and I knew exactly who had loaded the weapon. Then came the social media posts. Maeve posted a gauzy, soft focus photo of a pair of tiny baby shoes. The caption read, "Some miracles take a little help from an angel. So grateful for my brother, who stepped up when we needed him most. Family is everything." There was no mention of me, or our money, or the agreement he'd shattered. Stefan shared it to his own page with the comment, "Anything for my big sister. Can't wait to meet my niece." The hesitation in that punctuation felt like a knife twist. He couldn't even type the word without qualifying it. They were building a story for public consumption, a fairy tale of sibling sacrifice. In their version, I was the evil queen, the barren, bitter wife standing in the way of their happiness. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost choked me. My last hope for a sane ally was Bowen, Maeve's husband. He'd always seemed like a decent guy, perpetually uncomfortable with the Warren family's intensity. He was quiet, observant, and I thought, on my side in a general sense. I found his number and texted him. Me. "Bowen, I need to know if you were aware of what Stefan and Maeve did. Using our money, him being the donor. I'm completely blindsided." His reply came back almost instantly, which surprised me. "Bowen, it's a complicated situation, Reese." Me. "It doesn't feel complicated. It feels like theft and betrayal. Did you know he was donating?" A long pause. The three dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute. "Bowen, Maeve has been through a lot. We just want to focus on the baby now." And that was it. He was a brick wall. He was cowed, just as I'd suspected, choosing the path of least resistance, which meant siding with his wife and her family. I was officially alone in this. That night, I opened my laptop. The rage had cooled into something hard and sharp. If they were going to build a narrative, I was going to build a case. I created a new folder on my desktop and named it Evidence. I started taking screenshots of everything: the passive-aggressive group chat comments, Maeve's saccharine Instagram post, Stefan's cowardly share. I saved every wheedling text he sent me, every missed call. I documented the exact time of Catherine's phone call and wrote down her demand verbatim. My mind, usually cluttered with work projects and dinner plans, had become a pristine, organized vault of grievances. This new focus led me back to our bank accounts. I wanted to know the exact damage. I wasn't just looking at the big withdrawals anymore. I started tracing the smaller ones, the ones disguised as medical copays and consultation fees. I cross-referenced dates with Maeve's social media posts where she'd vaguely mention a tough appointment or good news from the doctor. The numbers climbed. A few thousand here for initial testing, another 10,000 for the first failed round, then more for genetic screening, medication, and finally, the successful transfer. I added it all up, line by sickening line. The invoice I'd found was just the final piece. The grand total was $35,728. Our lake house down payment, gone. My emergency fund, gone. I looked at the remaining balance in our joint account. There was barely enough to cover the mortgage for 2 months. I thought about calling a lawyer, but the bitter irony hit me full force. They had used my own money to screw me over, leaving me with nothing to fund my own defense. Unless I started fighting back very, very creatively. The fallout was swift and silent. Within a day, I was blocked by Catherine, Maeve, and a handful of aunts and cousins on every platform. It was like I'd been digitally amputated from the family tree. The isolation wasn't just online. I ran into a mutual friend, someone who had been at our wedding, at the grocery store. She saw me, her eyes widened in a flicker of panic, and she abruptly steered her cart down another aisle. The message was clear. Sides had been chosen. Even work became a minefield. I work in marketing, and my job requires a certain level of social ease. But whispers followed me down the hallway. I'd walk into the break room and conversations would die. Stefan's family had deep roots in our community, and Catherine was methodically poisoning the soil around me. After a week of living like a ghost in my own home, eating takeout over the sink and trying to ignore the silence where my husband's presence used to be, I hit a wall. I was sitting on the floor of my closet, surrounded by his clothes that still smelled faintly of him, and I just broke. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would answer without judgment. Brinley, I sobbed, the name barely making it out. Reese, what's wrong? Where are you? Brinley's voice was an instant anchor. We've been best friends since we were 5. She knows the sound of my every emotion. Through hiccuping breaths, I told her everything. The invoice, the donation, the money, Catherine's demand, the shunning. She listened without interruption, a long silence on the other end of the line as I unburdened myself of the whole ugly story. When I was finished, her voice was cold fury. That's not a family, Reese. That's a cult. And Stefan didn't just break a promise. He committed financial fraud. You need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. You need a shark. I can't afford a shark, Bryn, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. He drained our savings. I barely have enough to cover the mortgage. Don't worry about that. I know someone. Her name is Angela Patterson. She handled a friend's divorce and she's brilliant. I'll cover the retainer. You can pay me back whenever. This is not a request. 2 days later, I was sitting in a sleek, minimalist office downtown. Angela Patterson was in her early 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a perfectly tailored suit that screamed competence. She didn't offer condolences or platitudes. She listened to my story, occasionally nodding and taking notes on a legal pad. I handed her the USB drive containing my evidence folder. She scrolled through the screenshots and documents, her expression unreadable. "This is a good start," she said finally, her voice crisp. "The social media posts, the texts. It establishes a pattern of emotional distress and public defamation. But the money is our hammer. What do you mean? We file for divorce on the grounds of marital fraud and misappropriation of community property, she explained. He used shared assets for a major life decision, creating a child, without your consent, in direct violation of your pre-established marital contract, even if it was just a verbal one. It's a massive breach of fiduciary duty. She leaned forward. But to make it airtight, I need more. I need every financial statement you can find. I need to prove he intentionally deceived you. I left her office feeling the first flicker of hope I'd felt in weeks. I had a plan. I had an advocate. The next blow came in the mail. It was a copy of our small town's community newsletter, left on our doorstep. Tucked in the back, in the local gossip column, was a thinly veiled item. Sympathies to a prominent local family who are celebrating a miracle baby on the way, even as they deal with the bitterness and jealousy of a certain in-law who, sources say, has been hiding her own heartbreaking infertility for years. Some people just can't stand to see others happy. It was Catherine's work. I could hear her voice in every cloying, vicious word. She was painting me as a monster to the entire town. The final insult arrived via a text from a sympathetic cousin-in-law who hadn't yet blocked me. It was a photo of an invitation. Ornate, cream-colored cardstock with baby blue lettering. You're invited to a baby shower celebrating Maeve and Bowen Rice. The date was set for a month from now. At the bottom, a list of hosts: Catherine Warren and Stefan Warren. My husband was hosting a party to celebrate the baby he created with his sister, using our money, while publicly humiliating me. I was, of course, not invited. I was forwarding the picture to Angela when my phone buzzed with an email from her. The subject line was just one word: gotcha. I opened it. The body of the email was short. Reese, I subpoenaed the clinic's financial records. They just came in. Stefan didn't just transfer the money. One of the largest payments required a spousal authorization form for release of funds from a joint investment account you two held. He submitted it, with your signature. I stared at the attached PDF. There it was, a crisp, clear image of my name, written in a flawless imitation of my handwriting. I hadn't seen or signed that document in my life. Angela's final line confirmed it. He forged your signature, Reese. We have him. This is no longer just a betrayal. It's a crime. The forged signature broke something in me. It was one thing to be lied to have my trust violated. It was another to see my own name used as a weapon against me. The sheer, calculated criminality of it sent me spiraling. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, barely moving from my bed. The house felt enormous and empty, a museum of a life that was no longer mine. On the 3rd day, I found myself back in the closet, the same place I'd called Brinley from. Surrounded by the remnants of my marriage, I felt an overwhelming need to speak my truth, not for them, but for me. I propped my phone up against a stack of shoeboxes, hit record, and started talking to the tiny black lens. My name is Reese Warren, I began, my voice raspy. And everyone in my husband's family is telling you that I'm a bitter, jealous, infertile woman. They're telling you that I'm trying to ruin a miracle, but they never stop to ask why. Why a child was a deal breaker for me. I took a deep, shaky breath. When I was 19, my mother died of a rare, aggressive genetic disorder. It's hereditary. There's a 50% chance I have it, and a 50% chance I could pass it on. It's a degenerative disease that ends in paralysis and a slow, painful death. I watched it happen. I decided then that I would never, ever risk putting a child through that. Not just the risk of the disease, but the certainty of watching their mother die the way I watched mine. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. Stefan knew this. He knew it from our 3rd date. He held me while I cried about it. He told me he loved me for me, not for the family he could have with me. He agreed. No children. It was the bedrock of our life together. For him to not only break that promise, but to use our money to create a child that has his DNA and potentially my mother's legacy of disease is a cruelty I can't even measure. I ended the recording, my whole body trembling. I didn't watch it back. I just started sending the video file. I sent it to my own family first, my father, my aunts, my cousins. Then I went through Stefan's extended family list, carefully selecting the ones who had always seemed more reasonable, the ones who lived out of state and weren't completely under Catherine's thumb. I attached a simple message. This is my side of the story. The first reply came from my dad. I'm on the next flight. The relief was so immense it felt like a physical weight lifting. Soon after, a text came from one of Stefan's cousins. Reese, I am so sorry, we had no idea. My mother is appalled. The first crack in their united front. Armed with this small victory, I met with Angela again. We sat in her office, a timeline of events spread across the table. The baby shower is our deadline, she said, tapping a date on the calendar. It's the perfect stage. It's a public celebration of their fraud. We'll have the subpoenas for divorce, financial fraud, and defamation served right there. The plan was audacious, theatrical, and exactly what I needed. It was a way to reclaim the narrative in the very arena they had built to celebrate my demise. That weekend, Brinley came over. She brought 2 bottles of expensive wine and a ruthless energy that was contagious. Okay, she said, setting her purse down. Angela has the legal side covered. We need to handle the money. You need to know exactly what he has and where it is. She pulled out her phone. I'm reconnecting you with an old friend, Samson Morris. Remember him from college? He's a wealth management advisor now, a damn good one, and he owes me a favor. I met Samson the following week at a quiet coffee shop. He was sharp and focused, with a no-nonsense demeanor. After listening to the whole story, he gave a low whistle. This is messy, he said, but financial trails don't lie. Give me your bank logins and any account numbers you have. I'll start digging. If he moved money, I'll find it. While Samson began his digital excavation, Angela continued her own. She sent another round of subpoenas, this time to the fertility clinic's administrative department, requesting all documentation related to Maeve Rice's treatment that was paid for by or involved Stephen Warren. The clinic complied. A thick manila envelope arrived at Angela's office. She called me immediately. You need to see this. I drove down, my stomach in knots. She had a single document laid out on her conference table, separate from the others. It was a familial gamete donation consent addendum. It required a witness signature, someone to vouch for the fact that all parties were aware of the arrangement and that it was being entered into without coercion. There were 2 signatures at the bottom. The first was Stefan's. The second, under the witness line, was clear and unmistakable, a looping, arrogant script I would recognize anywhere. It belonged to Catherine Warren. She hadn't just encouraged this from the sidelines. She had been in the room. She had co-signed the document that sealed the destruction of my marriage, making herself a direct, legally culpable party to the entire deception. Seeing Catherine's signature on that form was like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. Suddenly, a decade of small, unsettling moments clicked into place. Memories I had brushed off as quirks or generational differences resurfaced with chilling clarity. I remembered our first Christmas as a married couple. I'd bought Stefan a beautiful, expensive watch he'd been wanting. When he opened it, Catherine had smiled thinly and said, "How lovely. But a wife's real gift to her husband is a legacy, dear." At the time, I thought she was being old-fashioned. Now, I saw it for what it was, the first test, the first hint that my value in her eyes was tied to my womb. Another memory surfaced, a family vacation a few years ago. I'd been promoted at work and was excitedly telling everyone about my new responsibilities. Stefan had been proud, but Catherine had patted my arm and said, "It's wonderful you have your little career to keep you busy." The condescension was suffocating. My independence wasn't an asset. It was a phase, a placeholder for the domestic role she believed I was failing to fill. Stefan had just laughed it off, his usual, "that's just mom" defense that I now recognized as cowardly complicity. He never defended me. He only ever managed me. I relayed all of this to Angela, my voice flat with a new, cold anger. She listened, her pen scratching against her notepad. "This is excellent," she said, her tone all business. Her signature on the consent form makes her an active participant. The pattern of behavior, the public comments, the newsletter, it all supports a secondary civil case. We'll file the divorce against Stefan, and we'll file a suit for defamation of character and intentional infliction of emotional distress against Catherine. The strategy was brilliant. By separating the actions, we were dismantling their united family narrative piece by legal piece. Stefan would be isolated in his fraud, and Catherine would be forced to answer for her own malicious campaign. While Angela prepared the new filings, the Warren family's delusion escalated. Maeve made a public announcement on her social media. They had chosen a name for the baby. "We are so thrilled to share that we'll be welcoming a little girl," the post read, accompanied by a photo of a sonogram. "We've decided to name her Stefania Catherine Rice." A beautiful name to honor the two people who made this miracle possible. My selfless brother, Stefan, and my incredible mother, Catherine, who held us all together with her strength and wisdom. I stared at the name. Stefania. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a branding. They were cementing the narrative that this child was a product of the Warren lineage, with Stefan as its symbolic father, and Catherine as its matriarch. Bowen, the actual husband and father, was reduced to a footnote in his own child's story. The whole thing had a bizarre cult-like fervor. They weren't just having a baby, they were birthing a monument to their own twisted sense of family. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another flying monkey from Catherine's camp. But I opened it out of morbid curiosity. It was a screenshot of a voice note, sent without any accompanying text. I recognized the sender's profile picture in the screenshot. It was the distant cousin from out of state, the one who had apologized after seeing my video. I pressed play. Catherine's voice, tinny and self-righteous, filled my car. She just never understood. "Stefan needs a legacy, a child to carry on his name. This is bigger than her feelings. She was a temporary arrangement, but blood is forever. Reese was never going to be good enough to be a part of our family's future. We just had to find a way to write her out of the story." The recording ended. I played it again, then a third time, the words burning into my brain. A temporary arrangement. Write her out of the story. This wasn't just about a baby. It was a long-conceived plot to dispose of me. They didn't just want a child. They wanted me gone. I forwarded the audio file to Angela with a single message. "Add this to the defamation suit." Her reply was almost immediate. "Oh, she'll be answering for this, Reese. This is the nail in her coffin." A week before the baby shower, the final piece of their grand performance fell into place. A local parenting blog, one known for its glossy, aspirational content, published an article titled, "A Sibling's Ultimate Gift: How One Family's Love Created a Miracle." It was a puff piece of the highest order, featuring professionally shot photos of a glowing Maeve, a proud Stefan, and a regal Catherine, all posed in Maeve's perfectly decorated nursery. The article spun their fabricated narrative into gold, quoting Maeve about her angel brother and Catherine about the unbreakable bonds of family. It mentioned the upcoming baby shower, describing it as a major community event to celebrate this beautiful modern family story. They weren't just throwing a party, they were curating a media event, and they had just handed me my stage. "This is our invitation," I said to Angela over the phone, reading the article aloud. "It's better than an invitation," she replied, a hint of excitement in her voice. "It's third-party documentation of their public narrative. It establishes a wider audience for the defamation. The damages just went up." We spent the next few days finalizing the plan. Angela had the legal documents drawn up and triple-checked. There were 3 large manila envelopes. One for Stefan, containing the divorce filing citing marital fraud and the evidence of his forgery. One for Catherine, containing the civil suit for defamation and emotional distress, complete with the newsletter clipping, screenshots, and a transcript of her voice note. And one for Maeve, naming her as a party to the financial deception, ensuring she couldn't feign ignorance. Samson had finished his financial trace, uncovering 2 more accounts Stefan had hidden money in, which was all detailed in the filings. 2 professional process servers were hired, instructed to meet us at the venue. The night before the shower, Brinley came over. She found me in my home office, staring at a blank screen, a blog post draft open and waiting. She didn't say anything, just wrapped me in a hug that felt like it was putting my fractured pieces back together. "You ready for this?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. "It feels huge, terrifying." "Good," she said, pulling back to look me in the eye. "It should. What they did was huge and terrifying. You're just matching their energy. Don't you dare shrink now, Reese. You walk in there tomorrow and you reclaim every single thing they took from you." Her words were the steel I needed for my spine. After she left, I sat down and started to write. I didn't write with anger or bitterness. I wrote with a calm, devastating clarity. I told the story from the beginning. The agreement, the love I had for my husband, the genetic disease that took my mother, and the painful personal choice it led me to make. I detailed the discovery of the betrayal, the financial deception, the forgery, and the vicious smear campaign orchestrated by my mother-in-law. I named names, cited dates, and stated facts. It wasn't an emotional plea. It was a final, irrefutable record. I titled it, "The Story You Weren't Meant to Hear," and scheduled it to post at 2:05 p.m. the next day, 5 minutes after our planned arrival at the party. I laid out my outfit for the next day, a simple, elegant black dress. It was the dress I'd worn to my mother's funeral. It felt appropriate. This was a funeral, too. For my marriage, for the woman I used to be, and for the family I once thought I had. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, as I was finishing my makeup, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Stefan. My heart gave a painful lurch, the last vestige of the woman who loved him. "I hear you're planning on coming today," it read. "Don't do this, Reese. You'll only embarrass yourself. This is not the time or the place. We can talk about this later, like adults." The condescension, the complete lack of awareness, was so perfectly him. He wasn't worried about my pain. He was worried about his party. He still saw me as a problem to be managed, a hysterical woman to be placated. He had no idea he wasn't talking to that woman anymore. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were clear, my hands steady. I felt a strange, serene calm settle over me. I typed back a short reply. "You're right. It's not the time for talk." Then I picked up my phone and smiled at the audacity in his last text. He was about to find out what embarrassment really looked like. The baby shower was being held at a local upscale country club, the kind of place with manicured lawns and valet parking. Angela and I met the 2 process servers, a nondescript man and woman in plain business attire, in the parking lot. They held identical leather portfolios. I held 3 thick, sealed manila envelopes. "Ready?" Angela asked, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. I nodded, my heart hammering a steady, powerful rhythm against my ribs. Let's go. We walked in at 2 o'clock sharp. The party was in full swing in a large, sunlit ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a golf course. It was exactly as I'd pictured. A sea of pastel dresses, towers of cupcakes, and a mountain of gifts in the corner. The air was thick with perfume and forced laughter. The parenting blogger was easy to spot, snapping photos with a professional-grade camera. The moment I stepped through the door, a ripple of silence spread through the room. The string quartet in the corner faltered, a violin squeaking into the sudden quiet. Conversations died, heads turned. Every eye in the room was on me. I could feel their judgment, a physical weight in the air. I ignored it. My focus was singular. Maeve, Catherine, and Stefan were standing near the gift table, holding court. Maeve was radiant in a flowing blue dress, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Catherine stood beside her, beaming like a queen mother, while Stefan played the part of the doting brother, a champagne flute in his hand. I walked calmly across the polished floor, my heels clicking a steady cadence. Angela was a step behind me, a silent, formidable presence. The process servers flanked us. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Stefan saw me first. The smile dropped from his face, replaced by a look of pure, panicked fury. "Reese!" he hissed, stepping forward as if to block me. "What the hell are you doing here?" I didn't even look at him. My eyes were locked on Maeve and Catherine. I stopped directly in front of them. Catherine's smile had frozen into a brittle mask of confusion. Maeve just looked scared. "Hello, Catherine." "Maeve," I said, my voice even and clear, carrying easily in the silent room. I held out the first envelope to my mother-in-law. "This is for you." She stared at it, refusing to take it. "What is this nonsense?" "It's a lawsuit," I said plainly, "for defamation of character and intentional infliction of emotional distress. There's a copy of the newsletter you planted the story in, and a full transcript of the voice note where you admitted to planning to write me out of the story. I believe the term is discovery." Her face went slack with shock. One of the process servers stepped forward and gently placed the envelope in her limp hand. "You've been served." Next, I turned to Maeve. I held out the second envelope. "This is for you. It names you as a co-conspirator in the misappropriation of marital assets. $35,728 to be exact. It's all itemized." Maeve flinched as if I'd slapped her. Bowen, who had been hovering nearby, rushed to her side, his face pale. The second process server handed him the envelope. "She's been served." Finally, I turned to my husband. He looked like he wanted to murder me. "You have no right," he sputtered. "You gave up your rights when you forged my signature," I said, my voice dropping. I held out the last, thickest envelope. "This is for you, Stefan. It's a divorce filing, on the grounds of marital fraud. There's a copy of the authorization form you forged, along with a sworn affidavit from a handwriting expert. The district attorney's office might find that particularly interesting." He snatched the envelope from my hand. As he did, Angela stepped forward. "For the record," she announced, her voice ringing with authority, "my client, Reese Warren, is filing for the dissolution of her marriage due to a breach of marital contract and fiduciary duty. Mr. Warren, without Ms. Warren's knowledge or consent, misappropriated over $35,000 in community property to fund a private fertility treatment for his sister, which included his own genetic donation. He then forged her signature on a legal document to facilitate this. Mrs. Catherine Warren then orchestrated a public smear campaign to defame Ms. Warren's character and reputation. All evidence is attached." A collective gasp went through the room. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. The parenting blogger was frozen, her camera hanging uselessly by her side. Catherine, white as a sheet, swayed on her feet. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she crumpled to the floor in a dead faint. Stefan started yelling, something about me being a vindictive monster, but his words were just noise. I had already turned my back on him. I didn't run. I walked, head held high, out of that ballroom and back into the sunlight. As the club doors swung shut behind me, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Brinley. "Your letter just went live. 45K views and growing." The drive away from the country club was silent. I didn't feel triumphant or euphoric. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. The adrenaline drained away, leaving behind a profound and aching exhaustion. My phone was a constant buzzing brick of notifications, but I didn't look at it. I just drove. The story didn't break. It detonated. My blog post, amplified by the dozens of guests who had witnessed the confrontation, went from a personal letter to a viral phenomenon overnight. It was shared in parenting groups, divorce forums, and local news pages. The parenting blog that had featured Maeve was inundated with comments and emails. By the next afternoon, they had taken the article down and issued a public statement about being provided with a misleading and incomplete narrative. Maeve's column was suspended indefinitely. The legal fallout was less explosive, but far more consequential. Stefan's lawyer called Angela the next day. Faced with irrefutable evidence of forgery, a felony, and the public relations nightmare I had created, they didn't want to fight. They wanted to negotiate. Stefan, true to form, chose the coward's way out. He wanted to make it all go away as quietly as possible. Angela was merciless. We didn't negotiate. We dictated terms. He would sign over the house and its remaining equity to me. He would be solely responsible for the debt he incurred funding Maeve's treatment. He would also return every cent of the $35,728 from his own assets, what was left of them after Samson found the accounts he'd hidden. He agreed to everything. The cost of his family's miracle was his own financial ruin. I heard through the grapevine that his company, citing a morality clause in his executive contract, had placed him on indefinite leave. Catherine's lawsuit was just as swift. The voice note was undeniable. Her lawyer advised her to settle immediately to avoid a public trial where it would be played in open court. She paid a substantial sum for damages and was legally required to post a public retraction on her social media accounts. The brief, stilted apology was a pale shadow of her usual performative prose. After that, she went silent. The queen of our small-town social scene was effectively dethroned, ostracized by the very community she had tried to weaponize against me. I sold the house. I couldn't stand the ghosts. With the settlement money and the proceeds from the sale, I was financially secure for the first time in my life, entirely on my own terms. Brinley and I took a trip, a long, meandering tour through coastal towns with no itinerary and no deadline. We ate fresh seafood, drank wine on windy bluffs, and talked about everything except my former life. It was a slow, deliberate act of rinsing the poison out. During that time, my blog post took on a life of its own. Emails poured in from women with similar stories of financial abuse, family betrayal, and medical coercion. My marketing background kicked in. I started a new blog, a platform dedicated to these stories, offering resources and a sense of community. It grew, and soon I was getting offers for freelance writing, for speaking engagements. My voice, the one they had tried so hard to silence, had become my profession. There are still days when the anger hits me, sharp and unexpected. I'll see a family that looks like ours used to, and feel a pang of something I can't name. Revenge isn't a clean, cauterizing fire. It doesn't erase the scars, it just seals the wound. There will always be pieces of that family, of the man I loved for 12 years, lodged in my memory like shrapnel. The cost of what I did was heavy. It cost me my past, my naivete, and a part of myself that believed in shared dreams. But it was necessary. They underestimated a barren wife, forgetting that a woman with nothing left to lose has nothing left to fear. They thought my only purpose was to create a legacy for them. They never counted on the fact that I could birth my own kind of justice. They built their fantasy baby. I rebuilt myself.